Welcome to the Tenkara Angler Level Line podcast. My name is Mike, and I'm happy to have an interesting panel of guests on this month's podcast. Joining me as usual are Anthony and Matt from the Tenkara Angler team. How's it going, guys?
Good. Greetings.
Good to be here.
Awesome to see you guys. We also have two special guests, and I'll preface this before I introduce them. The last podcast we did on destinations, I think it was episode 25. If you check your podcast playlist, we talked about a bunch of different Tenkara places or locations that we like to Tenkara fish in, or we think that you might like to Tenkara fish in if you're a traveling angler. In looking back on that, based on where a lot of us live, we happened to notice they were all east of the Mississippi River. And in the case of Bill, he was actually in Portugal. So he was way east of the Mississippi River. So we recruited a couple additional guests this time to talk about destinations west of the Mississippi River. So I'm happy to have Payton and Keegan joining us today.
Awesome.
How you doing, guys?
Hi.
Great to have you. Payton, why don't you introduce yourself real quick for those that don't know you?
My name is Payton, and I am the host of a YouTube channel called Skiddy Fishing, and my platform is mostly Tenkara based. No pun intended, Keegan. I know you're going to cover the channel name here, but my channel is pretty much Western fly fishing or Tenkara fishing. I'd say about 80% Tenkara based because a lot of people have learned that I'm a huge advocate for native trout, and there is a lot of different native trout out here in the West. So I do a lot of these native trout slams or challenges going to other states, and I've just learned that being in the headwaters, Tenkara is the perfect tool for the job. So I chase adventure. I do some rod impressions along with my adventures as well. I call them impressions just because I don't really believe that I'm a deep dive reviewer. I leave that to the king, Tom Davis, but I like to keep things simple with Tenkara on my approach. So a lot of just Utah-based adventures, but surrounding states as well.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, it's great to have you. We've been talking and been friends on online for a long time. It's finally nice to actually talk to you live, and maybe at some point we'll actually
I would be thrilled. We were talking about this a little bit, but I'm going to make it public. I was fangirling a little bit with this opportunity today. Been listening to you guys for a couple of years now, and it's just, I love what you guys do for this community. Honestly, it's a real privilege to be here. Absolutely,
well, we appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And then Keegan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. I just want to echo what he said about the podcast, getting into this. I only started Tenkara fishing in 2023. And I have a tendency to go pretty crazy with my hobbies and dive in real deep and then surface sometime a decade later. But there's not a ton of information about Tenkara out there. And Tenkara Anglers is one awesome source. So, I just want to echo that. In terms of an introduction, I was born in Wisconsin. I grew up mostly in Boston. I went to college in Vermont, and now I live in Burbank in Southern California. And so been around a bit. I fished a little bit as a kid, mostly bass and bluegill. I mean, I lived in Lexington, the birthplace of America, in the Revolutionary War and the shot heard around the world and all that, if you know your Revolutionary War history. And there was a little reservoir that they used for drinking water hundreds of years ago. And now it's got bass and bluegill and had some perch in it when I was there. So I started fishing there and in the mountains of New Hampshire at summer camp. And then pretty much didn't fish a lot until I was up in the backpacking in the Eastern Sierra here in California. And there's just a ton of fish everywhere. And for years I just backpacked stepping over them and was like, oh, that's cool. And then finally my son was like, I want to learn how to fish. And I was like, oh, well, okay. I'm not psyched about the warm water species that I fit in the mud holes that I fished at home. But, we went on a backpacking trip and a friend brought a fly rod, and just the beauty of these trout just really struck me. Just the gems and the spots on a brook trout and the golden trout, it was insane. And so immediately I was like, great, we'll do that. And then my buddy said, hey, you should check out Tenkara. And then, one Google search later, and now we're all the way down the rabbit hole, having taken the blue pill or whatever it is. So now I'm in Southern California. I fish mostly small streams because that's what I have. Not a lot of people know, but there are 10,000 foot mountains 45 minutes from my house. So I can be playing in 4 feet of fresh powder in the winter in in the mountains right outside of Los Angeles. And so we've got some trout streams locally. Some of them were even historically steelhead run streams from the Pacific. And I'm working with some nonprofits to try to restore those streams and remove dams and that whole thing. But we really screwed it all up. So it's going to be a long process. And then my other real, like I like to say that my soul lives in the Eastern Sierra at elevation. That's what I'll talk about today. But that's the other place I fish, mostly in California. I also have a YouTube channel that I used to, 15 years ago, I did backpacking gear reviews and stuff like that. And I just sort of rebirthed it with Tenkara because there's not that much information. And as I was learning, I just wanted to give as much information away to other people as I could and contribute that way. And so, yeah, that YouTube channel is mostly Tenkara, and it's just been super fun. Like I was just in Colorado with Jason Class and Jonathan Antunes fishing last weekend, and they taught me this amazing new technique. And I'm also a filmmaker. And so I have the resources to be able to kind of like put together a good video without much, honestly, effort on my part, just because I've been doing it since I was in high school. And so it's really fun to be able to give back. And then the only other thing I do is I'm sitting here in my garage, which is also this like small leather goods business. And I make wallets and notebooks and belts, all kinds of leather accessories. I started that about 2012 and it's been going ever since. And so that's just like, I've got a bunch of different jobs, and then 2 kids is a whole other job as well. So sorry for the long introduction, but that's a little bit about me.
Well, no, I appreciate it. I actually, for both of you guys, we'll obviously put the link to both of your YouTube channels in this video's descriptions. But the one thing that I really like about both of your channels is the different, kind of production value that goes into it. A lot of people just are strapping the GoPro on their head and not doing a lot of like, in front of the camera or anything like that. I love that both of you guys jump in front of the camera, talk about what you're doing, whether it's about rods on your end, Skiddy or Keegan. I dive into a whole lot of topics. You were interviewing people, like you said, which was really cool. That one you did with Jonathan.
It was. I watched it.
Really eye-opening. It was a great, well done, well edited too, by the way. So
yeah, that was.
We'll put a link to that one in the description too. So I guess without further ado, we'll kind of jump on in. There's 5 of us, so we're going to try to cram in 5 different Western United States locations. I'm going to kick it off. I'm going to put you on the spot, Anthony, since you had to go print your notes right before we hopped on. Why don't you tell us about your location and a little bit about why you like it for Tenkara?
All right. I'll try to be a little briefer than I was last time, though I have 4 pages of notes, so I don't know. I'm going to talk about Rocky Mountain National Park. It's a place that is like really dear to my family. We went there with our kids when they were little. I think I've been there 5 times, and it's just like my wife and I just went recently last week. It was emotional for us. She didn't want to leave, so it's an emotional place for us and very sentimental. So, I got a soft spot for it. So Rocky Mountain National Park, if you're not familiar with it at all, it's sort of north central Colorado on the, on the front there. So near Loveland and Fort Collins, if you know where those are. If you're going to fly into Rocky Mountain, you're going to go to Denver or Colorado Springs. If you can go to Colorado Springs, do that. It's so much more pleasant than flying into Denver, which is horrible. Like it took us like an hour and a half, 2 hours to get our car. It was just a nightmare. We had like 3 different cars we went through before we found one that was working. Anyway, Colorado Springs, I've never had a problem. So
Denver's like a long airport to walk through too. I feel like I get to my gate and I have to walk like 2 miles just to get to where like baggage is and stuff. Anyway, whatever.
Having just been there, I can agree with that.
Yeah.
But also, don't ever fly into LAX. Just don't ever do it. Just fly into Burbank because it's even worse than that.
Half of Denver's like tornado shelters too. It's kind of funny because you think you'd be in the mountains, but you're really in like the Nebraska of Colorado.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's weird if you I've driven there numerous times. Yeah. When you come into Colorado, I mean, that like Western Nebraska, Eastern Colorado is the most boring drive you'll ever have in your life, driving in. But yeah, anyway, so if you could fly into Denver. I think it's about an hour and 45 minutes from Denver, and it's a little longer from Colorado Springs, but it's a much easier airport, smaller, easier to deal with. So Rocky Mountain National Park is for the angler. It's kind of got everything. It doesn't have any really big streams, but you've got tumbling mountain streams, you've got lakes, and you've got meadow streams. So it's kind of a cool destination where you can kind of hit all these different kinds of water. If you're into backpacking, you could do multi-day trips in the backcountry and hit some of these high alpine lakes, which is out of my, realm. So I've never done that, but that's a possibility too. So you've kind of got all your different kinds of fishing, which is really cool. The reason we really like it and the reason I love it is as a family destination. So if you've got a non-fishing partner or you got kids, there's so many cool hikes you can do of all different lengths and many of them along streams. So what I'll often do is we'll hike along a stream and you'll take a lunch break and I'll get the Tenkara rod out and fish for 10, 15 minutes while my wife is eating lunch, or she brings her knitting with her. So she'll knit, she's making a sweater while I'm fishing. So it's just a great destination for families. And I think that's what's really, really cool about it. And those are my favorite kind of fishing destinations. I love the driftless, but I'm never going to get my wife out there. There's nothing for her, but Rocky Mountain with the scenic drives, and the wildlife and everything, it's a great destination. So you're looking at, mountain streams, meadow streams. You can catch brook trout, brown trout, rainbow trout, Colorado River cutthroat, Yellowstone cutthroat, and greenback cutthroat. So you can catch a lot of different kinds of fish. I don't keep any, so I'm not really sure on all the, I'm sure you get the browns and brookies and rainbows. I'm sure you can keep those. So I don't really pay attention to that, but you can catch a lot of different kinds of fish. If you're looking for big fish, probably not the place you're going to go. But if you're looking for like fantastic scenery, and it's hard to put into words how beautiful it is. So that's kind of the setting. Mountainous. You've got a lot of the mountains are high, obviously, so you can get above tree line and those alpine lakes. And I would say like most of the fish I caught were like max out at like 12 inches, but I caught a few in the alpine lakes that were bigger than some of the lakes. And these were pretty accessible lakes. I didn't do any 10-mile hikes,
Sure.
to get to them.
I'm sure you get to this, but if you don't mind, what sort of gear did you use to fish those lakes? I think most of us, when we think about fishing in mountain streams and whatever, we have setups that are set up for that, but lakes maybe not so much. What kind of Tenkara setup did you use?
So actually, like this time, so to go back a little bit, the first time, there's a little bit of Tenkara history. Like the reason I ever bought a Tenkara rod was because I was going to Rocky Mountain National Park. That's the reason I was back in 2000. What was it? 9? I think I bought one because we had a trip planned, and it was a Ibisu. But before the trip, my nephew was fishing. We were fishing in a lake back here, and he got stuck in a tree, and he got like the tip stuck, so I couldn't put the tip back in. So the first trip to Rocky Mountain, I'm hiking along with my Ibisu in my backpack, but the tip is sticking out, and people kept stopping me thinking I was like tracking animals or something.
Your antenna.
Is that I had an antenna sticking out? Yeah. So Rocky, in my personal Tenkara history, that's kind of the reason I bought a rod. So in the case of this trip, I fished mostly with a Tanuki Pocket Ninja, 11-foot Pocket Ninja, just because it's so stinking easy to throw in your pack, and it's 11 feet long, which for the streams in Rocky Mountain, that's perfect. Like you don't need anything much bigger. So when you asked about the lake, so what I did do, I took a couple rods. And I would just take one. I would take 2 rods with me in case I broke one. I don't want to be stuck with that one. But I took about 10 different lines, of different lengths.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the lakes, what I took was I had some like 15 and 18-foot floating lines that I took with me.
Okay.
That were made out of I like to make them out of the Euro lines, so I could fish, a little further out in the lakes pretty easily with those. So that's what I did for the lakes. And those cast, wonderfully on Tenkara rods. But when I was there, and I can't speak to all the times, so this was the, early September, almost mid-September, the trout were close in. There were trout cruising the shallows in the lakes, so you didn't really have to cast too far. So that was kind of cool, like you could catch a lot right along the lakes, right along the shallows. And to just talk a little, since I'm talking about the lakes, since you asked about it, I fished 3 different lakes and had different experiences. The one lake, I don't know if I want to spot burn or not, so I won't mention the names, but the one lake that I fished, you could get to in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, was full of cutthroat, just full of trout. So you don't have to hike way into the backcountry to get into fish. They were like very accessible. And even though the park is a popular park and it's very busy, there's very few anglers. Like you don't see a lot of anglers. So if you're on the water, you're generally fishing. Now you may end up in a lot of people's photos, because they think it's kind of cool to take a picture of you, But yeah, so there's not a lot of anglers.
So dress your best is what you're saying.
Yeah, right. Yeah, handle the fish well because people might be filming you. But the one thing that that I found anyone in the lakes, and I knew this from when I was there years ago, the one lake I was at, I mean, you might have it in your head. You're in the mountains. You can fish with anything, right? And the fish are opportunistic, and it's not necessarily the case. Like on the one lake that I was at, there were midges hatching. And so you could get an occasional fish to hit something bigger. But if you didn't have something, the fish were coming up one after another eating these midges. And if you had something
I've been at that high alpine lake and I hate it. I was like, they're eating. What are they eating? And I'm hitting them in the head with the kabari and they won't take it. Yes, I've been in those lakes when those lakes when those stupid midges are there. Ugh, the worst.
Yeah. Yeah. So, be prepared with some tiny stuff, take your Tenkara stuff, but throw in some little midges in case you run into it. Cause if I managed to get a few there, but if I know if I had something tiny, I would have picked up a bunch of fish. So yeah. So the lakes are cool. But don't think that you have to hike in 11, 12 miles. I mean, you can, if you want to, but you can get some really nice fishing pretty accessible. Cause I think it's very underutilized as a fishery for them, in my experience anyway.
Real quick, I have a question for you. So you mentioned greenback cutthroat,
Sure.
and I don't know if you know much about the history of greenback, but the Colorado Department of Wildlife kind of messed them up by planting pure strain Colorado River cutthroats in with the greenbacks, and it kind of messed up the genetic strain. I don't know. Yeah.
I remember that.
Specifically, like the pure strains are separated if that's outside of the park and stuff. But I was curious if you knew if they were pure strain greenbacks or not, because that is like a bucket list fish for me, is the greenback cutthroat.
Right. I mean, I can't speak to all the history of it, but there are signs that you'll see in the park at certain lakes, in certain streams that say that it's greenback cutthroats in this lake and in the stream above the lake. So there is signage to that effect, if you go there. Now, whether, what you're talking about has occurred there, I don't know, but there certainly is signage that says it's greenbacks and tells you, release them immediately. And I was afraid I didn't take any pictures of them because I didn't, I was like I wanted to be very careful. So I caught a few that, because I know when they color, like the greenbacks in the Colorado River, they can be hard to tell the difference, So I tried to be careful with those. And the other ones you can tell, like the Yellowstone or the, you can tell those right away. Yeah. So real quick, the hardest part, so it's an easy place. There's lots of trails. It's very accessible. You can get to a lot of fishing without a lot of hiking. The hardest part of visiting Rocky Mountain is the timed entry system. So if you haven't been to national parks lately, I mean, I kind of feel bad for people that aren't very computer savvy because it's difficult. And Rocky Mountain was more difficult than any other park I've ever been to. It's super difficult. So if you haven't been to national parks lately, there's a timed entry system, and Rocky Mountain has two different corridors. So you've got a timed entry system for the sort of the main park, and then they call it timed entry plus for the Bear Lake Road section, which has a lot of the really nice trails on it. I made the mistake that, I was kind of under the assumption that, usually in these timed entry systems, you can get in before 7, or whatever. But in Rocky Mountain, the main Trail Ridge Road and stuff, you can get in before 9 or after 2 if you don't have a pass. For the Bear Lake roads, it's before 5 or after 6. So you pretty much can't get in if you don't have a pass. If you're going to visit, those passes generally go on sale a month before the month you're going to visit. So if you're going to go in September, you got to start on August 1st. You need to be online, because I got on we were away. So I got on August 8th, and all the passes were gone in 8 days. So even in September. So if you're going to go to Rocky Mountain, pay attention to when the passes go on sale and get your passes. They're cheap. They're only $2. The other thing you want to be careful of, you can only get one per person, per day. So you can't I'll get one for this one and then I'll buy one. You can't do that. So your spouse or someone else could do that. So the day before, the other thing that's good to know if you're going, say you don't get passes for when you want. We were able to get passes for 11 a.m., 4 p.m., things like that, but nothing early. The day before at 7 p.m., they release more passes. So you can get online, and they go fast again. So you got to get on at 7 and you got to try to get passes. But if you already have passes, you can't get them. Your spouse or someone else in your party needs to sign on and get them. So that's just something to be aware of, is that timed entry system.
And it is important too, because, those of you that have been reading Tenkara Angler for a little bit, Matt and I fished with some Japanese anglers out at Rocky Mountain National Park. What was it, 2 years ago now, Matt? Probably.
Yeah.
And we had to juggle that And the one day we went to the Bear Lake Court or whatever, I think the only pass we could get was like 5 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
And how cold was it that morning, Matt? It was
Very.
it was freezing.
Yes.
So we just had to kill time in the cold, waiting for like the water and the temperature to warm up so the trout would be active. So I
Do
think
some
we went
calisthenics and by the car, some
Oh,
squats
we
to
went
keep
for
your
a little
body
hike.
warm.
We went on a little tour. We went and looked at a lake, and I think it was the day there was actually an eclipse. So there was some lady taking a picture of like the eclipse with her camera. So we were kind of hanging out and talking to her for a little bit. And yeah, just to kill some time for it to warm up. We definitely did that wrong that day.
Yeah. So you got to, just be, I'm sure there's so many people that show up and don't know about this system. So just be really aware of that and when it goes on sale. The other tricky thing about Rocky Mountain is there are shuttles. The shuttles in the park, in the Bear Lake corridor, they're free, but they're to add confusion to it, there is what they call the hiker shuttle, which comes in from Estes Park. So the shuttles in the park, you don't need passes for. If you're in the park, you can use it on that Bear Lake corridor. The hiker shuttle from the town of Estes Park, you do need passes for. And again, they go on sale like a month before the month that you're going to be there. And they were all sold out when we got there. So, when we were planning our trip. So again, if you get a hiker shuttle pass from Estes Park, you do not need the timed entry passes to get into the park. You just need your park pass. And I'd recommend getting, if you're going to go get the, the America, the Beautiful Pass or whatever it's called, that lasts for a year at all the national parks. But it's kind of tricky. So the shuttles are just in the Bear Lake area. I'm going to in a little bit, I'll talk about a little bit of a hack that we discovered for the whole timed entry system, which I think is kind of a cool whole part of what I have to tell people is this little hack that I found. So we'll talk about that in a second. Let me go and just talk a little about the setting. So if you're going to go to Rocky Mountain, the town that's there's Estes Park, Colorado is kind of the setting for there. And there's hotels, motels, condos, all sorts of lodging. If you're going to go there in July, August, plan ahead of time because I'm sure they get full. But there's plenty of lodging. You have several fly shops in town. You're not in the wilderness. You've got everything you need, so you don't have to worry about that. It's a cool little town. If you got a significant other doesn't fish, there's shops and lots of restaurants and stuff. It's a cool little town. It reminds me kind of Gatlinburg, but actually kind of smaller, than Gatlinburg. Not but that kind of thing. So that's the kind of the setting. Lots of lodging. The place that we love, and this kind of involves that hack for the timed entry system, is the YMCA of the Rockies. So we've stayed there like 3 or 4 times now. When I first heard of it, I'm thinking YMCA, I'm thinking this little tiny thing. But the YMCA of the Rockies is like 850 acres. They have 9 hotel lodges. They've got over 250 cabins, indoor swimming pool, mini golf, craft center, fly fishing guides. It's a big place.
Old breakfast bay.
Yeah. They've got a cafeteria with you can have breakfast, lunch, and dinner there. There's a cafe. It's if you have kids, even if you don't have kids, like we were there, my wife, I went fishing one day and she made a silk scarf, so it was kind of cool. It's a great location. The lodging, like the hotel style lodging, doesn't have cooking facilities. So you'll be eating out. The cabins are, full modern cabins, bathrooms and cooking facilities and everything. So it's awesome. If you're a member of the YMCA, you can book them a little earlier, but we've never had problems being non-members getting booking there. But the cool thing is if you stay at the YMCA, Glacier Creek, which is an awesome creek, is the border between Rocky Mountain and the YMCA. And you can walk right over the hill and fish. You park in 5 minutes, you're on the stream. And then there is a shuttle stop that you can walk to. So if you're staying at the YMCA of the Rockies, you can actually walk to a shuttle stop and you don't have to worry about the timed entry system. You can get the shuttle in the Bear Lake corridor and go anywhere you want. If you go to their rec center there, they had like a schedule that would show you when, the shuttle showed up. It's a Tuxedo Junction is the one that's there. And if you want to get to some of the parts of the Bear Lake corridor, you got to get to the park and ride and get to a different shuttle. But anyway, it solves the whole problem. If you haven't been on the ball and you didn't get your passes, you can walk in. So it was pretty cool. You can walk to there's the Sprague Lake. I don't know if you've ever been there. You can walk right there from the YMCA. It was like a 3-mile hike and stuff, and you can fish there. So it's we love it there. It's a great place to stay. So that's, kind of the setting. I don't know if anyone has any questions about anything we've talked about.
Yeah, I have a question. You actually didn't bring it up, but I know there's a lot of wildlife viewing opportunities when you're at the park. There's one kind of resident animal that's very prolific, especially in the fall. You want to tell people about that?
Yeah. Let's just talk about like when to visit. That might be kind of
go ahead.
enter into this. So, you could probably, I mean, you're in the mountains. There are like 14,000, Long's Peak is 14,000 feet. A lot of the park is above tree line. So you're looking at visiting July, August, early September. You're not going to go in May. You're not going to go late September if you hope to do much hiking. While we were there in, this past week, the main road that goes through the park was closed like 3 days while we were there because of fresh snow and ice.
Wow.
So you do have to be careful of that. But if you're going to go, we've always gone at the end of August, the beginning of September to avoid some of the crowds. We figure like more kids are back at school. So if you're going to go and you don't have kids, go very late August, early September, I think is perfect. And like Mike was talking about, as we were there at the YMCA, the elk hadn't started the rut yet, but while we were there, they kind of descended on the YMCA and would go out in the morning, and there were battling elk, and bugling elk right in the baseball field, and you drive around the park and in the meadows. Everyone kind of like in the mornings and the evenings lines up to try to see them, but it was pretty cool. Yeah, we got to see like a lot of elk that were, in the rut. They're kind of battling and bugling, and we got to see some Facebook famous elk. My wife is in these groups, and she would recognize them, like that split five, or whatever. Yeah. So that was kind of cool. It was really cool. And we saw like 3 moose. Again, they're kind of on the move in the fall. Yeah. So if you go kind of in early September, you got a chance to see a moose. We saw them driving around, and also while we were hiking, we saw some moose. So that was pretty cool. We didn't see any bighorns in the park, but we saw them when we were driving around in other areas. Yeah, so it was pretty cool to see the elk. Yeah, I mean, you'll see them whenever you go at any time of the year.
Totally,
they're going to be there. But this time of the year, you kind of see them.
They're active and bugling and doing all that stuff.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. If you don't have young kids and you don't have to worry about the school year, I would go second week of September would be kind of ideal. I think it's still busy. I mean, the park is you still got to get your passes and all that. You can't count on it like being empty. But we were just in Glacier a few weeks ago, and compared to that, this was much more pleasant. But that said, you got to get to, say you want to go, fishing early, you got to get to the main park is open. You can get in before 9 without a pass. But if you wait till then, you may not get parking spaces.
But yeah, the trailheads, they crowd up pretty quick with people that are there just to hike or whatever, right? So
right.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, so the trailheads get filled up. I would plan on being at a trailhead by 8 at the latest, if you plan. Like we went to the Wild Basin area, which is pretty far out of the way, but we were there at 8:15, and I think we got one of the last few spots that were available. So yeah, so anyway, that's kind of the park. It's beautiful. Trout season in Colorado is kind of, I don't think there's really any season. And if you're non-resident, it's kind of expensive. It cost me, I think, it cost me about $60 to get 6 days of fishing. Year license for non-residents like $120, and it runs from March 1st to March 31st of the next year. So not super cheap. And you have like some parks, like we were in Glacier, you didn't need a license. But in Colorado and Rocky Mountain, you do. So you have to plan on that, getting a license. You can do that online. I've got this is the book you need. I don't know if it'll show up because it's not going to. So we'll have to put a link up to it. But I have a book. It's called A Fly Fishing Guide to Rocky Mountain National Park by Steve Schweitzer. And it is pretty much definitive. Like if you get this book, you'll know where to go fishing, So he's got all the streams, and it actually serves as a great hiking guide too, because most of the streams are along, trails and trailheads and stuff. So that's it's called Rocky Mountain National Park, A Fly Fishing Guide.
Did you pick flies based off of that book, or did you just kind of wing it? And did you have like a go-to fly when you were there?
Yeah. So that's a good question. I had tied up a bunch of flies for Glacier when we were there. And so I just grabbed that one fly box that I had, so I had some stimulators, some smallish stimulators, some caddis flies, some like Takayama, Sakasa Kabari, some muskrat nymphs, like a waltz worm. If you're familiar, like I never go anywhere without those. and some bigger like hare's ear beadhead nymphs. And really on the higher gradient mountain streams, it didn't matter that much, Now you did have to get down. Like on some of the streams I fished dry flies and, nothing. And I had to get pretty deep to get any fish. But if you got down, they would kind of hit anything, And then the other thing to be aware of, and your mileage may vary, but when I was there, the fishing didn't pick up till 11, 12 o'clock, so there was no sense in getting out super early because the fish weren't biting. I paid attention to every day when they started hitting, and it was 11:30, 12 o'clock before I got any action.
Can I ask you what were the temperatures like at that time? Because that's a fascinating, and water temperature, because I know around here in Southern California, it can be so hot that you have to fish super early morning, and then the fish stop biting in the middle of the day. But then when I was in New Hampshire last month, it was the reverse. They didn't start biting until 10 because of and so I'm curious, at elevation when it's cold, is that really just waiting for the air on the water to heat up a little bit?
Yeah. So the air, so when we would wake up, it would be high 30s, and then once the sun came up, the air didn't warm up, but you felt the radiation, you got warm, but it took a while for the air to warm. And so I don't know, I don't know if it was the water warming up enough for the fish to get active or the bugs. You know what I mean? I kind of suspect that it was the bugs, that they kind of got active as the water heated up, and that's when the fish, you got more active. But yeah, so it was cold. It was pretty cold in the mornings. And that's pretty typical. I mean, at those elevations in August, right? We've been there and it's snowing in August and stuff. So it could be pretty cold, but yeah, I didn't have my stream thermometer with me, so I can't tell you what the water temperatures were, but it would be high 30s in the morning, and it might get up to 70 in the day, something like that.
It's been very similar here too.
What elevation are you at right now, Matt, in Idaho?
I'm at about 5.
Okay, and then Rocky Mountain, where you were, that was probably higher than that, 8, 9?
Yeah. So when you're in Rocky Mountain, when you're at Estes Park, you're almost at 8,000 in Estes Park. So anytime you go for a hike, you're generally getting up higher than that. So 8,000 and higher is where we'd be fishing. The lakes were probably more like almost 10, something like that I fished.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, sounds like an awesome destination. I know I fished there. I would highly recommend if you haven't and you're interested in fishing, either somewhere out west, or maybe you're already out west and just want to try a different state. Rocky Mountain National Park is one of those places where when they talk about Tenkara perfect water, it truly is. So I appreciate you giving us that kind of rundown, Anthony.
Yeah, it's an easy to do. You know what I mean? If you're kind of intimidated, if you're new to it and you're kind of intimidated by a trip out west, it's pretty easy to do, to put together,
Totally.
So
all right, cool.
And I do have to mention one thing. I don't know if whoever's been there. Did you ever go to the donut house while you were there, Mike?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so I have a sweet tooth and I love donuts. So there's this cool place called the Donut House. It was this little yellow wooden building with flowers on it. It was so cool, and we were there and we just couldn't find it. And we're I was showing up on the maps, but I wasn't paying that much attention. While here, they put in a traffic circle. And eminent domain came in and they lost their building, but it's in a Sinclair gas station. So if you're there and you're looking for the donut house, it's still there. But
what's your go-to donut?
To go to a gas station, but it's worth going to. I like a fritter. They have an apple fritter.
I'm a fritter
really
junkie myself, actually. I love apple. Blueberry it's rare, but when I find it, man, it's amazing.
Yeah. So if you're there, go hunt down the donut house. It's about HAUS donut house, and it's really good.
Yeah,
it's German. The donut house.
Right.
Well, cool. Well, let's kick it over to you now, Skiddy. I don't know if you've got a donut house. I've been to Utah once before, and I've gotten Crown Burgers, but I don't know. Tell everybody about one of the places.
So I'm going to broadly cover one area, but I'll quickly just cover kind of Utah from top to bottom, just because it really is an easy state to navigate. I mean, if you look at the state from a map standpoint, it's a pretty symmetrical state. It's almost a square. And if you were to take the state, and I'm going to use a third grade term here, but if you take a piece of paper and you fold it like hot dog style, so it's folded vertically, the left-hand side of that paper would be like the Great Basin. Like most of people in Utah are in the Great Basin technically, and Interstate 15 is the spinal cord of the state. So it just goes from the top of the state all the way down to the bottom. Now, the east side of the highway is the actual boundary for the Rocky Mountains. So I have Mount Nebo just a hop and a skip away from me, which is a 10,000 plus foot mountain. And every single city from the border of Idaho to the Four Corners has a city with a canyon, with a river, with fish. So Utah, yeah, you could be in the Red Rock desert of, the St. George area where, again, Red Rocks or Arches National Park, and you'll find native Bonneville cutthroat trout streams in scorching heat. And you're like, how do these fish survive? And that's because these creeks are in these like slot canyons where the sun never shines and the water stays cool because of that. And there's an ethical time to fish for them. Obviously, you don't want to fish for those in the middle of July and August during peak heat, but it's amazing the places where you can find trout. And so if you ever just look at Utah from a map and you're like, where do I start? Just the whole east side of the state is quite literally the Rocky Mountains. And again, that goes all the way to Colorado and up to Canada and stuff. But the area I think I'm going to focus on is an area that we broadly call the Uintas. And it's kind of the upper right-hand corner of the state. It's about where, so again, if Utah was a perfect square, it's about where Wyoming kind of comes into the corner there. And what's cool about the Uintas is it is an outdoor enthusiast dream. And I call it Trout Disneyland because it's perfect for those who are entry-level fishing, whether that's Tenkara or fly fishing, and you just want to kind of get out and catch some quality trout. I mean, to give you some context, in the Uintas alone, there are over 600 lakes, and all of them are within walking distance of a road, really. It's kind of crazy. I mean, some of them you really have to get to a trailhead and you have to hike to, and you can start anywhere at 6,000 feet and you can be to 11,000 feet by the time you hit your destination. One specific road, which covers kind of the primary area I'm thinking, is called Mirror Lake Highway or Highway 150. And it goes from the town of Camas, Utah, all the way up to Evanston, Wyoming. So it's a scenic byway. Again, you surpass 10,500 feet elevation. You pass the headwaters of the Provo River. So for Matt or Mike, you said you've been to Utah. I'm assuming you've heard of the Provo at least, maybe. So the headwaters to the Provo are there, the headwaters to the Weber River. We have the Duchesne River. There's the Blacks Fork River, which actually terminates in Wyoming. And what's really cool about this whole area for me, again, kind of premising that I love native cutthroat trout, is Utah has 4 native cutthroats and 3 of them are all kind of in the boundaries of this area. So you have Colorado River cutthroat near the boundaries of Wyoming. You can jump down to the Duchesne River just south of that and also catch Colorado River cutthroat. The Bear River is also in the Uintas. So you can fish the headwaters to the Bear River and catch your Bear River cutthroat. And then there's a Bonneville cutthroat in abundance up there as well. And what's particularly interesting about those species is there's even an overlap in the boundary where historically and geologically these fish actually kind of intermingled and kind of hybridized. And now it's like questionable whether the Bear River cutthroat will ever be its own formal subspecies. So you can kind of, you don't really know which genetic strain you have when you get them.
Can I ask a question? I'm following along on Google Maps here. And so it looks like there's a singular sort of spine that Kings Peak is sort of in the middle of the Uintas. And then it drains both to the north and to the south. And it looks like in every single drainage, there's just a river that I'm sure is full of fish. And then some of them have reservoirs. So do you also get like reservoir run, like larger fish sometimes at different times of year in there?
A good fish in a creek is probably going to be about 9 to 12 inches. And keep in mind that especially when you get to that elevation and similar time to the Eastern Sierras, I'm sure, which you'll mention, the growing season's pretty short. So when you get to that elevation, it's mostly fishable probably from August through September, and that's about it. You get like a 2-month of just premium fishing. But when you hit kind of the lower elevations, you can fish it year round. In fact, people ice fish those lakes as well, as long as you have a vehicle that can get you within a proximity of those lakes. And Kings Peak is the largest mountain in the state. That's the tallest peak. And it's astronomical how much water you can fish. And I would dare say that every single body of water does have trout in them. When you start fishing lakes, you're going to catch more brook trout and tiger trout, rainbows, more stocked quality fish. But yeah, I mean, I've done so many runs in the Uintas, and I just kind of really started exploring that maybe 4 years ago. And I have this a goal on my Instagram every year to just try to hit maybe 3 or 4 new bodies of water each year. And I'm thinking, doing the math, it would take me like 200 years to actually hit every body of water at that rate. That's how much water there is to fish up there.
That's wild.
I mean, just looking at the map, it just looked like it's just littered with high alpine lakes, the same way the Eastern Sierra.
It's
and
kind of like a
parts of the
mini
Rockies
Idaho.
are,
I mean,
too.
Idaho has so much creek to feed that it's almost overwhelming to look at by a map. And so when you're looking at that map and you see Mirror Lake Highway, which is, Highway 150, that's kind of mostly where most people are going to probably explore. Again, that goes all the way up to Evanston, Wyoming. There's highways just south of that which follow along the Duchesne River, which is a totally different drainage. But you can also go all the way around up through Salt Lake, over through Evanston, Wyoming, and back into the Uintas as well from, I guess, the north side. And you could start fishing the Blacks Fork rivers as well. And there's an East Fork and a West Fork. And what's really cool about this place is, well, and sometimes I feel like everybody in Utah is like an outdoor enthusiast, and that's a good and a bad thing because you're constantly sharing the area with everybody. And similar to you, Anthony, it's if you're not like kind of first, you're last when it comes to the trailheads. But what's interesting is that America the Beautiful Pass works for the entire area up there. So if there is paid trailheads to park at, you just, that pass will work, or you can just pay $5 for the day and you're covered there. Most parking probably requires some sort of payment, but it's really a 50-50. I mean, if you've got an off-road savvy vehicle, you can kind of get off the main road a little bit and find some primitive parking, and it's not that hard. But camping could be paid. It could be primitive. You can hike to your destinations and camp. It's got like a 14-day limit of parking per place that you park. So, I mean, you could pretty much just endlessly explore up there and never see the light of day ever again. It's a really easy place to get lost into. Wildlife are everywhere up there for those that do like wildlife. It's not uncommon to see a moose up there at any point of the year. I mean, people are able to get up there as early as June to some of the headwaters. And it seems like every single day on these Facebook pages that I follow, everybody's seeing a moose. It's definitely black bear country, so you got to be aware of that. But sometimes I feel like black bears in Utah are kind of like coyotes. They're pretty scared, especially if you're making noise and you're talking and stuff. I don't think they're really anything alarming or threatening. Cougars, though, you got to be aware of the cats. I mean, and just droves and droves of deer, which is super fun. But I really like exploring the Provo River right now. I don't like the tailwaters, but I do like exploring the headwaters right now. So for brook trout enthusiasts, there's just an abundance of brook trout up there. But if you start kind of getting into the North Fork and exploring some of the tributaries that come into that, you can find your native cutthroat. It's super fun. I'm a big fan of the Uinta. Sorry, let me go through my footnotes here. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself with excitement.
Yeah, no worries. One thing that I think maybe just to kind of set the table, if somebody was coming from out of state,
yeah,
wasn't driving in, right? Like, where would I fly into, and what would be a good like base camp town for me to stay at if I wasn't going to like backpack and hike?
So, two towns I would focus on. Well, so flying in, I would fly through Salt Lake City or Provo Airport. If your local airport has an Allegiance airline, there's a good chance it might go to Provo. And Provo's it's the second largest city in the state. It's dead center. Or you could just go to Salt Lake International. And I don't think Salt Lake is nearly as intense as some of the other airports we mentioned at the beginning. It's not hard to get off and kind of get out of the city. I mean, it's right next to downtown Salt Lake City. So, I mean, if you get through rush hour, it can be a little overwhelming trying to, get through the brunt of the traffic. But it's crazy because once you kind of get up into the first canyon outside of Salt Lake City, you really don't feel like the capital is right there. It's just within minutes, you're just kind of up in the mountains and you kind of feel you're actually in the Rockies, which is super cool. But two towns, I'll focus more on the second one, but you could go in north from Wyoming, and Evanston, Wyoming is a border town, and that could be a good base camp if you want to hit some of the North Slope sections, such as the Bear River or the Blacks Fork. But if you want to do maybe the Provo and the Duchesne and, Mirror Lake Highway, which is kind of, Keegan, you were mentioning, you were looking at the map, there's a mountain town at the top of Provo Canyon called Heber. And Heber is Just a beautiful mountain town. It's kind of got a little bit of everything. There's good food. There's lodging. Park City is actually just right down the road from there. And for those that don't know, Park City is where Dumb and Dumber was filmed when they were in Aspen. But it's just a ski town. So, for those that are looking to, maybe not fish or be super outdoor centric, there's lots of shopping there. There's bars.
And that's really close, right? That's like an hour from the airport.
You can actually get through it from Interstate 80, or you can go up through Provo Canyon. So depending on which airport you fly into, which probably 9 out of 10 times, that's going to be Salt Lake International. Yeah, you could take I-80 and it will go straight up to Park City. You can actually even get up to Evanston from I-80 as well. So really, if you want to go to the North Slope, Park City might even be a good base camp as well. It's just a big tourist town. So obviously you're going to pay a little bit more to stay in Park City for lodging versus Heber, which is really just another 20 minutes east of that. But the cool thing about Park City, though, is given that it's a ski town, it's kind of a ghost town right now, specifically, late September and October, because everything's closed down. So you're not going to get like access to, as many bars or as many restaurants. But the rates of the hotels are super low. In fact, I'm staying in Park City this weekend just because it is that cheap. And, you kind of feel like you get the whole town to yourself in a way that way. But once you get to the ski season, it's, probably similar to the reservation system.
So could you base camp in Heber or Park City? Because it looks like it's only like half an hour to all those destinations in the Uintas that you were
absolutely.
just talking about, right?
So if you're looking at the map, there's a reservoir called Jordanelle. That's the only thing that really separates you from a straight line to get from Park City to the Uintas via Mirror Lake Highway. But I mean, to drive around it is beautiful. So it's just, you have to drive around this reservoir, and then all of a sudden you're in this, this base highway. And again, camping is immediate. You really don't have to go far to camp. And when you camp, you're not sharing camps, where people are kind of invading your spot. Some camps you can probably reserve in advance, but I would say it's kind of a free-for-all, first come, first serve if you're going to actually camp up there. But I like Heber just because it's a little bit cheaper, and it's right at the base of the dam of Jordanelle Reservoir. So it might be actually quicker to get to the Uintas through Heber than it is Park City.
Can I ask another question? How are the roads up there? Are you able to access fishing spots with a crappy rental car that you would probably get if you flew into Salt Lake City Airport? Or do you need like high clearance 4x4? And maybe there's some spots that you do, but in general, it sounds like there's a lot of spots that you'd be able to reach in a Toyota
so for
Corolla
those that have been following my channel for the last 4 years, I've been doing everything through a Kia Soul. So it's very, very possible. The Mirror Lake Highway is asphalt all the way up through to Evanston, and they're going to plow that road until basically the snow is taller than the plow itself. At some point it's insane how much it snows up there. Quite literally, guys, it's probably 10 to 12 feet of snow to the point where it's snowmobiles or bust if you're going to go up from that point. But yeah, you can absolutely get to most trailheads on asphalt through just a regular everyday car. If you want to go a little bit above that. So I did one trip this year where I did some, so again, when there's 600 lakes, most of these places don't have names. In fact, they might even have numbers tied to them. So like one could be like BR 90, which represents Bear River Drainage and lake number 90. I just made that name up, by the way, for anybody that might look into that. But we actually had to take a Jeep up there. We needed the clearance. We needed a rock crawl. It was super sketchy. So there's something for everybody. If you want to rock crawl and do something intense, there's trails for that. But if you want to keep it lighthearted, along Mirror Lake Highway, there are lakes where you can fish for 10, 15 minutes and you can actually walk across the street to the next lake. And then you can walk across the street to the next lake and you don't even have to get back in your vehicle because it's right there. But because of that and how Utah is with all of these, outdoor people and many of them being hikers and paddle boarders and stuff like that, if you want to fish a lake, you got to fish it early. For me, it's kind of a little bit backwards, even all the way up till the end of October. I think fishing at 8 a.m. is the best time to fish if you're going to do it. And by maybe 10 o'clock, everybody and their paddle boards are on these lakes. You kind of really need to start moving into the tree lines a little bit to actually get to proper lakes or proper creeks and things like that. As far as flies go, there's 3 flies that you could probably use for the rest of your life up there, and they'll work everywhere. Number 1 is going to be the purple haze, which is a fancy name for purple bodied parachute atoms. It's just purple body, white indicator tip to it. That works everywhere, quite literally in the state of Utah. The purple chubby Chernobyl, which is kind of like a terrestrial pattern. The brook trout will go nuts on that. I've done these trips where, and to give you guys some context, the lakes are glorified ponds. I mean, lake is not even the right word to say for it. Most of these you can do a quick lap around within 5-10 minutes and you've covered the whole lake, which makes it so these trout really like to follow the shorelines a little bit, and you might have down trees that are partially submerged, and brook trout love to cling to structure. So I can take like a dragontail hydra, which I've done, and I could cast that chubby Chernobyl over the tree branch, and suddenly it's like first cast, you've got a brook trout on the line, and the brook trout might be averaging maybe 8 to 12 inches. So lake fishing is very, very possible with a Tenkara rod. I would strongly recommend it. I've actually done trips up where I've done the very end of October, and some of the immediate access lakes are definitely irrigation use. So they're going to pump the water out. It's going to go into the Provo River. And I've been able to walk out and wade throughout the entire lake. And suddenly there's these spin fishermen that are just on the banks, banging their heads against the wall. They're wondering why they're not catching fish. I'm standing dead center in the middle of this lake, and I've kicked up all the mud and the sediment and stuff at the bottom because it's not like, there's not a lot of vegetation, but I'm catching brook trout and tiger trout on dry flies within 2 feet of me. I mean, literally to the point where it's like they're so close to me, I can't even set the hook with this Tenkara rod because they're too close to me. And I've got videos of this stuff. It's wild. So, I mean, you can fish it year round. If there's a time to avoid, I would say the immediate summer, just because you're going to get runoff. You're going to get the mosquito hatches, which are insane up there. I mean, you really do want to avoid the mosquitoes at all costs. So I'd say like peak summer experience, probably the end of July. But I think the very end of August through September, just like everywhere out here in the West, it's like fall is the best time to fish. All the hatches are going crazy. It's pretty much impossible to fish the wrong fly. And, everything's hungry, and, it's, I don't know. I feel like I'm really, really spoiled to be out here. I think I mentioned there were 3 flies that I would use. The third one was a kabari, the pheasant tail kabari from Dragontail. I use it a lot up there, and it works really well. So yeah, that's the Uintas. I'm trying to think of.
Sounds amazing. Can we get a sponsored trip, maybe?
I'll make you a deal.
Like
Anytime you guys come out here, I will drive you up there myself. I will pay for the gas, and I'll spoil you. I love sharing my local waters with people, and it's really not hard for me to get to. I mean, where I live here, it takes me an hour and a half tops to get to the first fishing spot. It's pretty quick for me in the mornings. Some other things that I think I failed to cover is we do have a couple local fly shops. There's one in the town of Heber called Fish Heads. I've never been there, but people talk about it a lot. It's located where it is because the middle tailwater of the Provo, coming out of Jordanelle and terminating in Deer Creek Reservoir, is the most famous section of the Provo River. So there's a lot of foot traffic and business there. And a lot of the fish experts, that work there probably are more in tune with the Middle Provo. And most of the guides are probably going to be there as well. So if you want to fish a really popular tailwater, deep runs, big brown trout, the Middle Provo is also there as well. And, I think it's overrated. You have to share spots with people. You have to kind of lock in and stay stagnant. So I'm not a big fan of that. But if you fish above Jordanelle Reservoir, which is the upper Provo River, it's pretty rare that I run into people. You get the whole thing to yourself. It's a little bit trickier to fish because it's a little bit more of a creek type system. Sometimes it's freestone. But I feel like there's sections where it's textbook. You feel like a fish should be there, and you might go a whole mile without any fish, but when you find them, it's just like every cast after that. So sometimes it takes a minute to find the fish when you're kind of in the upper Provo area. But yeah, it's super fun.
Yeah. I was out there when that's actually where I met Mike out in Utah for the first time. And a friend of, we went up, it was on the Provo, I think. And do you remember when that summit was? What month that was, Mike?
I don't remember. I just remember the Summer Olympics were on television. That was when Michael Phelps was winning all those gold medals. That's all I remember. So it had to be in the summer at some time.
Yeah. So we went upstream, and it was like the rubber hatch. There were like Tubers.
Yeah. So that's
everywhere.
the lower Provo. That's the very bottom tailwater. Right now, the city of Provo has actually granted land rights to private owners, and there's a big fight going on with that. So the areas that you fished may be private now, including the land underneath the water, which is a real problem right now. You won't see that in the middle tailwater. You just have to share it with more people. And by privatizing it, that forces more people to go to the middle. So now people are more congregated. And I don't feel like that's a good Utah authentic experience. People talk about it, and I understand why it's popular because it's so easy to get to. But if you really do get up into the Uintas, I mean, I've got videos that cover so much of this, and videos that have just been posted recently where, I'm taking the Tanuki Pocket Ninja and I'm scoping a water out that Amanda was talking to me about when she was coming out for the Tenkara camp out for Idaho. She's like, hey, what do you think about this spot? I'm like, man, I've drove past that spot like 100 times. I've never even thought to fish it. So then I just decided to go do it on a whim, and I'm catching native cutthroat all of a sudden. And it's like every time I go up there, there's a new water to fish, and I can't even keep up with it.
Sounds like there's like just so many options, to potentially entertain. I guess before we wrap this one up, Anthony kind of set the table in terms of like food. Is there somewhere you would recommend eating after a long day of fishing?
Yeah, I'm a burger nut myself, and there is a place in Heber called Dairy Keen. That's Keen. It's home of the train. There's this train that kind of goes around like a model train, and they've got this. I don't even know what's on the train burger. I think it's just like ham, Thousand Island, pickles, and a couple other things. But if you go there on a weekend, it's super busy. Like you might be waiting a minute for your food. You may not even be able to find parking for it. So be aware of that. They're closed on Sundays. It is Mormonville, so a lot of stuff does close on Sundays in Heber. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Dairy Keen. There's one place that's actually on Mirror Lake Highway. And forgive me for not knowing the name of it. I've never stopped there, but you can actually park right off the side of the road, and it looks almost like a little biker bar. And they actually serve like fresh trout at this restaurant, and it's not hard to miss. It's just the parking's kind of quirky because it's limited given its area there. But yeah, they'll serve fresh rainbow trout, smoke it and stuff. They've got like a rooftop place that you can kind of sit on top, and it's like you're just in this like canyon, just seeing all this beautiful scenery and stuff. And yeah, you can kind of go there and stuff. So that might be one worth looking. I was kind of scoping that one out for Amanda, but yeah, if you're a burger person, Dairy Keen's a really good one.
Awesome. Sounds like an amazing opportunity. I can't wait to get out there. I haven't been out to Utah to fish in probably a decade. So
anytime, I'll take you
out there. So, awesome. Well, Keegan, you want to talk about California a little bit?
Sure thing. I'm just going to dive right in. Can I share my screen? I'm going to try to do that.
You can try. Sure.
For people listening to the podcast, I apologize a little bit. I am going to talk about the Eastern Sierra. And so California, the Sierra Nevada runs north to south on the eastern side of the state. And the way it formed, it sort of rose up out of the deep as almost like a plate, and then it tilted. And so what you have is you have the west side of the mountains that rise slowly from the Central Valley, Fresno, Bakersfield, where we grow food. And there's lots of big rivers that drain that side. And then the eastern side of the mountain drops precipitously to the Owens Valley below. And so here on this map, you can see the road is 5 that comes up from the south. And we've got Lone Pine, Independence, Big Pine, Bishop, Mammoth, where Mammoth Ski Resort is, Mammoth Lakes, and then up here, Bridgeport. I'm going to talk about the Southern Sierra, so from Mammoth Lakes south, and I do most of my exploring and fishing and backpacking around Bishop and Big Pine, Independence, and Lone Pine. But what's interesting about the mountains is from the Owens Valley, which is where 395 runs, and the Owens River is in the valley. Well, it's very complicated because it was in the valley until LA started stealing all the water, and now it is only in part of the valley, and all the water is being sort of siphoned down to LA. But that's that's the subject of the movie Chinatown with Jack Nicholson, and a much larger conversation. But the west side of the mountains rise very slowly. And so on the west side, you have to drive and drive and drive and drive and drive to get up to an elevation. On the east side, the mountain rises from 4,000 feet at the valley to 14,000 feet in a couple miles. It's just a sheer cliff. And that sort of brings me to the first thing I want to say about the Eastern Sierra Nevada. I think it's one of the most beautiful places on earth. Now, I haven't been a lot of places, but I know of there's a National Geographic photographer named Galen Rowell who traveled the entire world. And he said that these are some of the most amazing mountains he'd ever been to. And it's called the Range of Light. And the light up there is magic. So I'm going to show you a couple pictures. This is my friend Pete with a real Western rod at about 12,000 feet on a backpacking trip, probably 25 years ago. And these sort of show you what these mountains look like. This is a lake I love. It's 5 miles up the trail. I've been there once a year for a decade. Muriel Lake. It's got big rainbow golden hybrids as well as big brook trout in it. And then there's more lakes actually up on the ledges towards the ridge there that have golden trout as well. This is the Big Pine, California in the city, and Big Pine Lakes. That's Temple Crag. That's the Palisade Ridge on the right there. The Palisade Glacier is the southernmost glacier in North America and the largest glacier in the Sierra Nevada. You can hike right up to it. This is South Lake in Bishop in the fall. The light is just incredible. This is my son sitting on the shore of Muriel Lake. That's actually Devin McPhillips, who just wrote a couple articles for Tenkara Angler. There with my son, and this is at about 11,000 or 12,000 feet in Humphreys Basin near Bishop, and they're catching brook trout and golden trout in this little drainage. The stars are absolutely insane up there. Hardly any light pollution. You've never seen so many stars in your life. It's just gorgeous. That's Banner Peak in the Ansel Adams Wilderness. This is about 20 miles from any road. And then the other thing you have in the same mountains on the west side, you have the sequoias, which are the largest trees by mass on Earth. And then just to the east, you actually have the bristlecone pines, which are the oldest trees on Earth. So it's just a veritable playground. And the scenery, it's just incredibly stunning. This is right below Mount Humphreys. We're actually jumping off the glacier that's going right into the river, into the lake. Beneath it, we had just caught 12-inch brook trout out of that lake a couple minutes before. This is my buddy on one of the high mountain passes. This is me taking a nap on an iceberg. If you go early season, which is May, the season up there is about May to October. If you go early season, a lot of the lakes will be iced in. And this is fall color. This is the crest of Mount Whitney. So Mount Whitney is the highest point in the lower 48 states. And that is in Lone Pine, California. This is the Minarets up in the Ansel Adams Wilderness. This is Banner Peak again. That's my dog. Rest in peace. But this is actually Half Dome in Yosemite from my campground. That's the moon. And that's the picture I show people when I say that the mountains are my church. It's just the most stunning place I've really ever been. So I'm going to come back on, but this is the map sort of showing you sort of the east side of the Sierras and the different regions. And I'll come back to this in a second, but I'm going to come back and stop sharing my screen.
While Keegan's doing that, I will say, if you are listening to this on, a podcast server, I would definitely go check out the YouTube video for this. The visuals he just put up on the screen are definitely worth, even if you just look at that. It's not that we want your views on YouTube or anything, although we'll certainly take them. Check out the slideshow. There were some stunning images. Anyway, sorry for interrupting. Go ahead, Keegan.
So, yeah, the Eastern Sierra was a place that I was living in Boston at the time when I learned about it. And my buddy was in San Francisco, and he's like, you got to come out. We got to do a backpacking trip. And we had backpacked in New England. So I flew from Boston to San Francisco and drove like 8 hours through Yosemite on 120 all the way to the Eastern Sierra. And now living in Los Angeles, I am 3 hours on the dot from Mount Whitney. And it is incredible. And a lot of, a place like Utah, and I was just in Denver, Colorado, a lot of people move there specifically to be in the outdoors. People move to LA to be in the movie industry or to be an actor. And so you don't think of LA as, like I said, I was telling you guys earlier, there's a 10,000 foot mountain 45 minutes from my house. I take my kids snowshoeing in 4 feet of fresh powder in the winter. And there's a trout stream 25 minutes from my door in Burbank, California. And I say that to people and it's just like blows their mind. It does not compute. And so, yes, basically, I could talk a little bit about access because this is not as easy an access. I mean, it's a very easy access. It's just a longer drive. So because it's on the east side, there aren't really big towns and airports there. You just go into Nevada, and Reno is much farther north and it's expensive to get into. San Francisco, like I said, is pretty close to the west side destinations. So there's a lot of big rivers on the west side, the Kaweah River, the Kings River. The Kern River is kind of on the southern tip. And you can definitely fly into San Francisco and access the west side, which has, like I said, the giant sequoias, which are just insane. It's so cool to look through, like you're scanning a forest of the biggest trees you've ever seen, fir and cedar and pine, and then there's just a tree that looks like a house, and it just dwarfs everything else. So if you want to come to a destination, particularly these mountains just have a really incredible amount to offer, and there are many things you can do, but you do need to spend some time because it is a bit of distance between them. So you can fly into San Francisco, but if you want to come to the Eastern Sierra, I would recommend flying into Los Angeles. But like I mentioned earlier, Los Angeles, LAX is it's just a difficult airport to fly into. It's kind of an S show, and it's always hard to get in and out of there. But if you can fly into Burbank, what's great about Burbank is it's about an hour, depending on traffic. It's 35 minutes if there's no traffic, sort of north of LAX. And so if you're going north anyway, Burbank is a phenomenal airport. I live literally a mile south. Sometimes I just walk home from the airport, which is like insane to me. But it's very easy in and out. It feels like a small airport. And then from there, in 3 hours drive, you get to Lone Pine, which is where Mount Whitney is, the tallest point in the lower 48. And it's a lot of people come there to climb Whitney. And then from there, you keep driving up 395 and you hit Independence and Big Pine and Bishop. And Bishop is between Bishop and Mammoth Lakes, which is the next town, you also have the Owens River. So the Owens River is one of the big rivers. It's the big river on the east side. And there's a lot of really great fishing destinations around Bishop, Hot Creek and the Upper Owens and the Lower Owens, and they get cutthroat runs out of the reservoir, and they have some big fish. And it sort of looks like it's a bigger river that really meanders and snakes through a field with just like a stunning backdrop of the Eastern Sierra on one side. And then if you turn this way, there's the White Mountains, and that's where the bristlecone pines are. So if you just drive 45 minutes up there, you get to stand next to a tree that's 4,000 years old. Just have your mind exploded in a different kind of way. When I moved here from the East Coast, I literally couldn't believe it. I called my parents and was like, why did you keep this from me my entire life? Because it's so incredibly epic in scale, the scale of everything. And the Sierra Mountains, I was just in the Rockies, and they feel different. The closest mountains that I've been to that feel like them are actually the Sawtooths in Idaho, where it feels very youthful. It feels like it's very canyoning. Everything's very steep. And so it's very sort of epic in its scenery. And so, okay, so let's talk about access. So I've fished a little bit in the lowlands, and the other river I should mention that's very close, again, 3 hours from my door, is the Kern River. And the Kern River is fantastic. I've just sort of started to explore it. It's a big river. It'll challenge your Tenkara skills. And it has some very, very healthy rainbow trout that fight like crazy, and it's addictive. 15 to 20 plus inch native rainbow trout, which is also cool because like stocked fish are fun, but I agree with Skiddy on this one that like I really do like catching native fish in their native habitat and wild fish the most. Not that I didn't just have fun in Colorado on that tailwater catching huge brown trout. But I think, anytime I get into native and wild
and to
fish,
piggyback off of that real
preference.
quick, it's interesting because, given that most people have experienced some stocked version of a rainbow trout, it's funny because they really are probably my least favorite species to target, but they are the best fighting fish, hands down, I think, in the entire trout family. And I've been studying the Kern River and its headwaters and tributaries for, the Goldens or Kern Golden, the hybrid and stuff. And I was curious. I don't want to get off subject, but you mentioned how like San Francisco is, not that far, or, LA is kind of a place that you can drive into. Those are very, very large cities for people who haven't been out west or maybe live in more rural towns in the Midwest. What's your experience of going from like LA or San Francisco traffic where it's just probably overwhelming, and then all of a sudden it's like this, you're in the middle of nowhere?
Well, so That is another reason to fly into Burbank if you don't want to fight through the city of LA to get north. Burbank, you just get off the airport and you're already out of the city. I mean, that's what's great about living up here is it's kind of around the northern edge. There's Santa Clarita and then that's it. So within minutes, you're on a highway and you're seeing nothing. And if you fly into LX, yeah, you gotta fight with the 405, which it's intimidating the first time you get on. You just have to plan for your exit like 2 miles in advance, so you have enough time to traverse 12 lanes to find your exit. But it's traveling now. Like the Denver traffic was just as bad. The Boston traffic is just as bad. It's not any different. Anywhere where there's a lot of people, the traffic is going to be awful. So again, fly out of Burbank. That's great. But I was really surprised that the drive is so much shorter from LA to the eastern side of the mountains. So let me talk a little bit about, you asked about what kind of fish. That's the other really cool thing is you can catch rainbow trout that are wild and native. You can catch stocked rainbow trout. You can catch stocked brown trout. You can catch stocked all kinds of trout. The brook trout are everywhere. There's places where you can catch Lahontan cutthroat trout, Paiute cutthroat trout. And actually, Skiddy, you probably know more about this than I do in terms of you're locating those little pockets of subspecies that you're targeting for the Western Trout Challenge and stuff like that. But I'll mention one really cool story. In, I think it was the 40s or the 50s, there was an exchange of eggs and fry with Colorado. So the California Fish and Game Service sent like 30,000 golden trout fry to Colorado in exchange for Colorado cutthroat. And they placed these Colorado cutthroat in the Mount Williamson Bowl, which is at like 14,000 feet. It's probably 12 miles and 8,000 feet elevation gain to get there hiking. So it's like no one's ever going there. No one's messing up. And they did that to safeguard the pure genetic strain of the Colorado cutthroat. And then later in 1979, they had messed it up in the hatcheries and needed some pure Colorado cutthroat. And there was a whole system of mules and helicopters, and they went up and like took a bunch of fish out of those lakes and resupplied Colorado with pure strain cutthroat. So there is one place with pure strain Colorado cutthroat way, 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 way up, on the highest ridges in North America. And actually my friend, and to make the story even cooler, if you haven't seen the documentary, The Manzanar Fishing Club, you should check it out. In World War II, when we interned Japanese Americans at Manzanar, the camp, it's right along the drive. It's right off the road. You can't miss it. And they would sneak out and go fishing. And a couple of them made it all the way up that 12-mile drainage and like camped in caves. And they came back with these cutthroat trout. And they had been called golden trout at the time. But in the pictures, you can see that they're cutthroat. And it's just a fascinating bit of history. I actually have a friend, one of my Tenkara buddies here, Kaz Fishing on Instagram, who was just up there recreating, and he went with one of the ancestors of one of the guys who was interned. And it's like this anyway, fascinating sub story that we can chat about later. But so the Eastern Sierra, the reason I talk specifically about that is because I fell in love with it as a backpacker. And backpacking is an incredible way to see it. People hike the John Muir Trail, they hike the Pacific Crest Trail. And off trail, what's one of the really cool things about these mountains is you can walk off trail very readily in places. So you'll be on a trail, but then you'll reach tree line. There's not many trees, and you might get into a wide open space like Humphreys Basin. You'll just be like, well, let's go to that lake. And you just start walking. And so you are alone. You don't see anybody. You can have a whole lake to yourself. You usually do. There's incredible solitude. But also, I understand that not everyone's a backpacker. Not everyone wants to walk 5 miles to whatever destination. And the cool thing is, because the Eastern Sierra, like I said, is like this. This is the Eastern Sierra, just a cliff to the Owens Valley, and the western side is much slower. You can drive in your car for 20 minutes and make it from 4,000 feet to 10,000 feet. And so near Mount Whitney, I'll start talking sort of a little bit more about species. So the golden trout have one creek that is their native creek. And it was 40,000 years ago or so, it was cut off from the rest of the watershed, and it was cut off from the Kern River. And so those trout evolved by themselves into that golden color. People think maybe it's because of the intense UV rays, maybe it's because of what they were eating. We're not really sure. But there's only one creek, and every other golden trout, every other place has been taken from that creek and raised in a hatchery or stocked in a lake and raised there. And so now you have golden trout, in Montana and Idaho, and I don't know if there's any in Utah, but there might be. And they're all over the place. Right there, you can drive to within a 10-mile walk of that creek on the eastern side. And right there, golden trout are just in every lake and creek. So if you want to find a golden trout, you can drive up three hours from LA, park your car, and fish the creek right next to the car and catch a golden trout. And a lot of people don't know that. They think it's this huge, if you want to catch a pure strain golden trout, sure, you're going to have to do that 10-mile hike and probably spend an overnight. That's what I would recommend. But in a day, a lot of people do it 8 miles in, 8 miles back to that creek. But right there, all the creeks are just filled with golden trout. And they're all, probably 80% goldens because they've hybridized with rainbows, either in hatcheries or in the wild. But then what's cool is in the lakes, there are some really big lakes and deep lakes on the slopes of Mount Whitney. The Boy Scout lakes have golden trout in them. The Cottonwood lakes have golden trout in them. And the golden trout get huge, like 20 plus inches. And now we can get into talking about Tenkara, where most of the fish and creeks are going to be small, like Skiddy said, like maxing out at 12 inches. Maybe that's a really big fish for a creek in the High Sierra. But the lakes, you have to fish them differently. I recently have I talked to David at K Rod Company, and I got a Sawana Bori 52 and a thin line. And so I'm working on kind of getting really deep into these alpine lakes instead of just fishing the cruisers on the bank that are at the surface and trying that out. So it's a different kind of challenge. So it's both those lakes and it's the creeks. And basically everywhere there's a town, there's a couple roads that go up that steep slope into the mountains. And then usually there'll be a campground up there somewhere. So very easily you can fly into Burbank, you can drive 3 hours, and you can be at a campground. Some of the campgrounds require reservation. They open about 6 months in advance. And then many of the campgrounds also have portions of the reservations that are first come, first serve. And it's all on the rec.gov website. And what I do is I pull up Google Maps, I look at where I'm going, I search the word campground, and the campgrounds pull up. And then when you click on that, you'll be like, okay, can you reserve this? And it'll take you to the rec.gov site, and you'll be able to see if you can reserve it or how many are first come, first serve. But there's some great campgrounds in Lone Pine. There's a Lone Pine campground. There's campgrounds at the trailhead to go to Whitney. One of my favorites is called Gray's Meadow, and it's in Independence. So it's about 2.5 hours, about 3.5 hours. And then you can just drive in, and it's on the way to Onions Valley, which is a big resupply for the PCT. And from there, you can get to lakes and creeks and everything. And so everywhere as you go up the road towards the mountains in a westerly direction, there are campgrounds. And it's really not hard to find a campsite, especially if you think in advance. If you're flying in and when you're buying a plane ticket 6 months in advance anyway, you can be like, okay, we'll reserve this campground, then we'll go here, we'll reserve this campground, and you can make your way up the east side, and you wouldn't have to do any backpacking or hiking at all.
That's cool.
And you would still get to experience the insane light and beauty of the mountains and all of this stuff. Needless to say, I have a lot of videos on my YouTube channel where I fish these kind of spots, and you can see sort of the majesty of what it looks like. If you do want to go hiking into the backcountry, it's not as regimented and regulated as the Rocky Mountain National Park stuff that we just talked about. And having just been there, I heard Jason Class and Jonathan Antunes being, complaining about this new system of timed entry. And then I had to get this one. But I didn't get into here. I had to get this extra one. And here it's a little bit easier than that, especially if you are willing to backpack. And I would make the case for backpacking, even if you're only going to walk. So I have a 5-year-old and I have a 9-year-old. And when the 5-year-old was 3, we backpacked 2 miles to a campground. And that gets you to a pristine high alpine lake, like the most beautiful scenery you've ever seen. And it took her all day, but she was able to walk the entire way at almost 4 years old. And her mother and I carried everything else, but it was fine. You need to know a little bit about the gear. But if you get a mile or two, just like anywhere in the national parks in Yosemite, it's the same way. Get half a mile in from the parking lot, and the people just clear out because most people are in flip-flops, right?
Totally, yeah.
So to get a wilderness permit, if that interests you, what you do is you go to rec.gov and you search for the Inyo National Forest or the Inyo County wilderness permits, and you'll see it come up, and it will show you all the entry points, and it'll have the trailhead. And then again, those come up 6 months in advance, but they only do about half of them 6 months in advance, and the rest come up 2 weeks in advance. So if you don't get one 6 months and you don't know your plans are, 14 days before at 7 a.m., you got to be on your computer being like, okay, I'm going to refresh. Okay, go now. And it's like a high stress situation, but I've never not been able to get a permit for a day that I want. Sometimes you have to adjust your trailhead. But what I always tell people too is anywhere you go up there, it's always amazing, right?
Right.
Anytime you go into the wilderness is going to be amazing, but especially in a place, if you pick the place that's beautiful.
Something
really
worth mentioning, if you don't mind me interrupting real quick.
No, go.
I feel like I've been fishing a bunch of states this year, even outside of Utah, and I've noticed that like really good fishing starts at 8,000 feet, but like epic fishing starts at 9,000 feet. And one thing that a lot of people listening to this who are thinking, man, I need to go out west, they're probably accustomed to sea level. And I've had the privilege of hanging out with some guys from like Pennsylvania. They come out, all of a sudden they're fishing at 10,000 feet. And it's not saying that everybody's going to go to California specifically for golden trout, but that might be a big reason to go, right? Because it's to catch native ones. That's the only place you can catch them.
So I have this on my list. Are you talking about like basically
altitude sickness and oxygen and yep.
Yeah. So here's the thing about altitude. Sleep the night as high as you can. You sleep high as you can. And the great thing about this eastern side is you can drive to a campground that's at 9 or 10,000 feet. The first campground, Google Cottonwood Lakes walk-in campground. You can't reserve any of those. You just walk up and you take a site. It's at like 9,000 feet. And if you spend the night there, then you're already acclimating. But yes, I mean, people climb Whitney, which is almost 15,000 feet, and they do it from sea level. They drive and then they have horrible seasickness. It's like, or altitude sickness. That's not the way you do it. You go in 2 towns above it and you spend 3 days on a backpacking trip. And then by the time you get to Whitney, it's nothing. You don't even care. So yes, you do have to be cognizant of altitude. And my recommendation is always like roll in for the evening. Don't do anything really strenuous. Just chill and hang out, and you're going to be like, why am I'm just gathering firewood?
It's no joke. I've gotten altitude sickness twice in the last year, and both situations were going from 5,000 to 9,000, but then back down to 5,000, then back up because I needed to get to another side of the mountain, and it's no joke. It creeps up on you.
Yes, and so if you want to spend a day or two fishing at 10, 11,000 feet, which is where the best scenery is, absolutely try to build in at least a night of acclimation and just take it easy. Drink a lot of water. I mean, what you said before about the sun, or we're talking about in Colorado, I was just in Colorado, it's just like in California. The sun goes away, you're cold, and you're like, what's going on? And then the sun hits you and you're like blazingly hot again. In the morning, there's frost on your tent and it's 20 degrees. And then an hour later, you're like, I got to get out of this jacket. Yep. It's just way too hot. Because hashtag the sun is hot. That's what my wife and I say. So yes, that is definitely something to think about. The other thing, and so yes, sun exposure too. Like bring your sun hoodie, bring your big hat. People out there in a tank top, they just get fried because the UV index is really insane up there. A couple of things while I'm talking about my list of things to consider. What I like to do, water. You have to drink a lot of water. And I know we all get into fishing. You're like, I haven't eaten or drank in 6 hours. What's going on? But yeah, exactly. But drink a lot of water. And the great thing about the High Sierra is the creeks are incredibly clear and just insanely clear. I still treat them, but you don't need like a big pump filter because there's no silt. It is literally like gin. It's just insanely clear. You're looking to the bottom of a 40-foot lake. It looks like a swimming pool.
So in the Uintas, there could be cattle crossing every single one of those creeks.
Right. Yes. And that is a great reason to also you got to treat your water for sure. Because it's all wilderness area and national forest, there's no cattle grazing at the elevations that I'm talking about. There's definitely cattle lower, like by the Owens River and in the valley in different places. But what I've found over 20 years of being there is there's a little set of drops called Aquamira. And you mix it, they're tiny, you fit in your pocket, you mix 7 drops of one with 7 drops of the other, it creates a little chlorine solution, and you dump that in a liter of water. So all I'm doing is like taking an algae and just filling it up in the creek that I'm fishing and putting that in, waiting 10 minutes, and then it's the best tasting water you've ever had. But that allows you to not worry about bringing water, because the other thing is there's just water everywhere. Anywhere you go in the High Sierra, there's just creek after creek, or you're going lake to lake, unless it's a super dry year, but I've almost never...
Well, that's good too because it's heavy, right? I mean, every ounce starts to bog you down, especially when you're doing those trails.
Yeah. I mean, when I'm backpacking, I carry a liter of water, if that, and just stop and fill up water a lot. Let me just talk quickly about the season. So, again, just overview. I would fly into LA if you want to do the southern eastern Sierra. If you wanted to hit Yosemite, San Francisco could be also a good choice, and you could do sort of the northern part of the range. But basically, May is the first time that you would be able to hit the upper elevations. A lot of those roads that come steeply up the east side are snowed in until about May. June and May, early season, is lovely. There's a lot of snow. The fish are active. You can catch fish. It's great. It can be a little bit cold. But once July hits, the problem is this. July is when the wildflowers are peaking and the weather is great, but the mosquitoes are also peaking. And you can be in one drainage and not have a mosquito, and you could walk in another one and you're just swarmed. But the good thing is by August, that hatch has died off and maybe there's some left, but usually by August it's chilling out. And then the Sierra stays incredible all the way through as long as the weather holds, as long as I've been there in the middle of November when we have a heat wave here in LA and it feels like it's like 70 degrees at 10,000 feet.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so really September and October, it quiets down. There's no one there. You get some fall color, and September and even into October, again, depending on the weather, it can be really, really amazing up there. And I would say August is the perfect month because the mosquitoes have chilled out. There's a saying in one of the books on the High Sierra that it never rains at night in August in the Sierra. And I found that to be true. If there's anything, it'll be a thunder shower, and not even as intense as in the Rockies. There'll be a thunderstorm and it'll blow through just as the sun is setting and it'll light up the clouds pink and you'll sit and think you're in a different universe. And then it'll be a starry night. It's incredible.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
no,
when
go.
you brought up the thunderstorms, I think that I forgot to mention that in my Rocky Mountain thing. Every day the thunderstorms roll through noon-ish one. So you plan your mornings to be up and down.
I think
below
every
tree line
Rocky
by
Mountain
12.
state is exactly like that. When it rains, it pours, and especially when you're at high elevation, I mean, it sneaks up, and it is like, I mean, it's get under a tree and hope your tree's not the one it targets.
Yeah, so worth mentioning. So we always plan a hike in the morning and then maybe something in the afternoon, but the middle of the day, yeah, you got to be careful. So sorry to interrupt.
No, totally. And in the Sierra, it's a little bit drier and it's a little less like that. I mean, in the last dry years, there have been, I don't think I've saw a cloud in the Sierra for 4 or 5 trips in those really years. Okay, here's the other thing about weather that I just thought of and I hadn't written down. You have to pay attention to wildfires. And there were some years about 10 years ago when I was like, I can't go late season anymore. If I don't go in June or July, by August, it's like smoked out. There were times where there was horrible, AQI 200 air all up and down the Owens Valley, and it just makes your trip really tough. And so you have to know about the wildfires, and they can start anytime, but you get on the Watch Duty app. That's the app to track wildfires in the West. And you can track the smoke, you can do these things, but also part of my gear now is always an N95 mask. So my friend was hiking the JMT, and I hiked in to refuel her with food. And there was a wildfire at that time, but I couldn't not hike in. She needed food, right? She's in the middle of nowhere. And so I hiked 12 miles up this drainage wearing an N95 mask. I camped like under a Mars looking red sky, and ash was falling on my tent that night. And we had dinner and we thought we were on Mars. It's crazy. So the wildfires can be bad, and you do need to think about that. And that can that can ruin August and September in the Sierra. And then let's just talk flies and gear and fishing specific. I want to mention one other thing. The west side of these mountains is also incredible, and it will have the bigger rivers. The only big river on the east side is the Owens. In the south is the Kern. But on the west, you've got the Kings, you've got the Kaweah, you've got lots of larger rivers that flow from there. And again, there's campsites all up and down, and it's in those big trees. So in the giant sequoias, I mean, you can fish the creeks right in Sequoia National Park. I mean, I was catching these little tiny rainbow trout right among the trees. And that's really a special experience too. And all that water on the west side is equally fishable. And so it's worth spending, if you're from the East Coast or from somewhere far away or another country or something, it's really worth spending a week or two and seeing as much of these incredible things as you can. I mean, I haven't even talked about the coast and Big Sur, but that's another discussion entirely.
Sounds like it.
So in terms of gear and flies and all that stuff, like Skiddy said, these are small fish. It's at elevation. The growing season is tiny, and there's just not a lot of bugs. There's not a lot of bugs up there at 10,000 feet because there's not a lot of trees. And so in terms of rods and stuff, I like long rods for the lakes and short rods for the streams. Some of the streams can be really tight. So some of my favorite rods are like the Coco 290, the Kurenai 30 or the 33, the Ito Shiro. That's the Oni Ito Shiro. My favorite 320 rod is the Wasabi from Anglo & Co. The Dragon Tail Kaida. A lot of other Dragon Tail rods are great for that. The Kokoro is great. Airstage Fujiru 330. If you want something that's super packable, like the Tenkara Mini or a Pocket Ninja or the Cable Rod Company Mini Max, something like that, that just disappears while you're hiking. But then for a lake, I might take the Oni Type 1 or Ragnarok or the Shinobi from Tanuki. That's the 395, the Oni Hanryu 395. Because some of those bigger 20-inch lake fish, you might want to have a beefier rod to be able to bring those guys in. The Gamakatsu 45, the Kurenai 45 is actually pretty sweet. It's still a small fish rod, but it's so long that when you're in these big meadows, you can be targeting, if the fish are spooky, from really far away, these tiny little
Keegan, I've seen you
fish.
fish on a couple of your videos at lakes. One of them, I think you were doing the Ragnarok and you're trying to get down as deep as you could on it. So like in the Uintas, you'll actually learn that most of the fish are really shallow, really close to the bank. So you almost want to like step back, 10 feet from the bank and cast and just get it barely into the water, if anything. Do you find it to the same kind of up there, or are you trying to get it as far out from the bank? Okay.
It's both. You have shore cruisers, and you've got like the biggest fish are going to hang way deep, because those are the fish that like especially if they're browns, they're just coming out at night and eating other fish, And so I think it's both of those things, and hence what I said before about like sort of trying a K-Roo style with like a 30-foot line, like trying to get it all the way down and target. I've just sort of started doing that, but most, the last time I tried that, like I caught one fish out of the depth, and my son had caught like 7 shore cruisers while I was doing that with the Kaida, just like, I got another one, Dad, And so shore cruisers are a sure way to go for sure. In terms of flies, it's sort of like if they're active and feeding, they'll eat anything. You could throw a piece of paper at them and they would eat it. But my favorite flies that I love up there are the dragon tail. There's 3 dragon tail flies that I just love. One is their little futsus. They have black and yellow futsu kabari. I think they're size 14s. And those were great up there. And the Copper John Kabari from Dragon Tail is one of my favorites because it has a little bit of weight and it sinks a little bit, so you can really sort of control the depth depending on how you fish it. And then I just sort of fell in love last year with the Oxford Bull Kabari from Tom Davis. When other things aren't working, that seems to just always work. And I really like those flies. The other interesting thing to mention about these lakes is 90% of the lakes in the Sierra Nevada had no fish historically. And it wasn't until the 1800s where we started stocking everything that there were fish. There's certain basins that they are now electrofishing out the fish to allow the native frogs to come back. There's the Sierra yellow-legged frog that's just decimated by the fish. And so there's certain basins you'll walk into that don't have any fish at all. And that brings me to share my screen one last time, and then I promise I will shut up and be done. But I'm going to share my screen because I know I've talked a lot. Okay, so this is a document that you can find online. Just search the Eastern Sierra Backcountry Fishing Guide, State of California Natural Resources Agency, and the Department of Fish and Game. This is a list of every single lake and stream in the Sierra and what kind of fish are in it. So this is like an invaluable resources. Invaluable or actually valuable? I don't know. But there are color codes. You can find your lake. So for instance, I know this drainage really well. Paiute Lake here says it has brook trout, and then there's brook trout and rainbow trout in this part, and then there's even a couple brown trout in Loch Levin Lake. And so if you're targeting a certain fish, it's easy to go in here and be like, oh, there's the Cottonwood Lakes that I talked about, right? So there's golden trout in all these creeks. And it tells you sort of exactly where everything is and what has been stocked. And this is just super cool if you're targeting a certain species, or you're just like, oh, I think this area could be good. I wonder what's up there. It's a really valuable resource. So I would definitely say if you're coming and you want to do any kind of backcountry fishing, check out the Eastern Sierra Backcountry Fishing Guide. In terms of maps of the area, you can look up Tom Harrison Maps. He has the best maps. And then if you want to read a really, really good book about this mountain range, Kim Stanley Robinson is a best-selling author, and he has been wandered the Sierra and backpacking the Sierra for years and years and years. And he wrote a book called The High Sierra, A Love Story. And it goes into the geology of the mountains and the natural history of the mountains. For instance, the Native Americans have been coming up to these mountains for thousands of years. And in these mountains, the black flint that they use for their arrowheads, obsidian, there is no source of obsidian in the mountains. So if you're walking in the mountains, even miles from a road, and you see obsidian shards, it's because the Native Americans were capping their arrowheads here. And there were summer camps. They would come up to these elevations, and you can still find their stone rings that they would use to create their teepees. And it's fascinating. And that book, The High Sierra, A Love Story by Kim Stanley Robinson, is such an amazing resource in terms of learning about the mountains and what they offer and why people fall in love with them, as I have done. And so I highly recommend that. And then the last thing, if you are going backcountry, definitely check out some kind of mapping application. Like I use Gaia GPS, not only to track where I am and know exactly, okay, I want to get to there. How long is that going to take? But before you go offline, you can route plan. So you can say from here to here, that's 5 miles. Or, oh, can I get to that lake? That's 2 miles. Sure, I can walk that. How much elevation feet gain is that? Some of them, it's a lot. Some of them, it's just flat. The one my daughter did was 2 miles of almost no elevation gain. And we were at this amazing fishing and camping spot. So in terms of route planning, something like that is really good. All right. So now I'm going to be quiet and see if you have any questions. I know I talked a lot, but I love these mountains so much and I love fishing them and just being up there. And so anything I can do to help others experience that.
I can't resist this comment, but Keegan and I have conversations on Facebook, but we don't type through Messenger. We actually do voice chats because our explanations of everything are so intricate and just they're lengthy. So we will have like these 5-minute, like, just like we're in the middle of work and we'll just spam as much as we can and try to, I don't know, it's so funny because this is exactly what it feels like.
Yeah, it's just like you could spend 30 minutes writing an email that's 3 pages where you could just be like, hi, I'm going to talk for 2 minutes into this phone. Yeah.
I've noticed that. I've gotten a couple messages from you, Keegan, that are dictated and not typed.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Especially with 2 kids. Like I don't have
ain't got time for that. I get it.
No one's proofreading an email in this stage of my life.
Well, cool. I definitely appreciate, both the passion that both of you brought to this. I mean, we've gone almost 2 hours, so I think Matt and I are going to put our stories in the back pocket, maybe for another podcast.
Sorry.
No, it's absolutely great. I mean, I learned a lot. I know I'm going to leave this with a total case of wanderlust, between Rocky Mountain National Park, the Uintas, or the Sierras. I mean, there's just so many. It sounds like endless options no matter where you go. So I did just want to thank you two for joining us tonight. Definitely check out, Payton Skiddy on Skiddy Fishing on YouTube, and then Keegan on mostly Tenkara on YouTube. We'll put those links again in the descriptions. And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, no, absolutely. We'd love to have you come back anytime.
Always happy.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
That was really interesting, guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
And clearly, I think Skiddy would agree. If you have questions about these areas, get in touch. You can find us on our YouTube channels or on Instagram. And we're friendly. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll send you voice messages via Facebook.
There you go.
Anyway, I want to thank you guys one last time. I thank everybody for listening. Do all the like, subscribing, all that stuff if you care to. Tell a friend, and we'll catch you next month. Talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.